Hello, my amazing children. This is Grandma Carla, and I am back with a new novel. This is a historical fiction, A Way Through the Sea, and this is by Robert Elmer, and it is published by Bethany House Publishers. So we're going to read A Way Through the Sea, but first I'm going to read you the exciting back of the book. For 11-year-old Peter Anderson and his twin sister Elise, living in the city of Helsingør, Denmark during World War II means German soldiers in the streets, German patrol boats in the harbor, and German fighter planes in the sky. Everyone is nervous, especially their Jewish friend Henrik and his parents. Before the invasion, no one in Denmark cared whether a person was Jewish. Now the Nazis are secretly rounding up all of the Jews who live in Denmark and sending them to prison camps in Germany. Suddenly, Henrik and his family must escape. Sweden offers the only place of refuge, but with soldiers lurking the streets and Nazi boats patrolling the sea, only a miracle can get the Jews to safety. So, this is looking like it will be a very exciting book, and we are starting with Chapter 1, War Messages. Okay, so here is a map of Denmark, okay, where this book is taking place. Okay, and this is not an imaginary map. This is a real live place, and this was a real live war. The only thing that's been changed are the people. The characters are fictional, and perhaps some of the events, but the actual war happened, and so much of this is true. War Messages, August 1943. The clock was ringing right in his ear from somewhere under the pillow. It almost felt like an electric shock, and 11-year-old Peter Anderson jerked up, reached under the pillow, and snapped off the alarm. He sat in bed for a minute, caught his breath, and listened to make sure his parents or sister weren't making any noises. All quiet except for his dad's soft, rattly snoring from down the hall. It had to be almost midnight, the time he had set his alarm to go off. Crawling out of bed, Peter peeked out from behind his window shade and looked up and down the deserted cobblestone street below. Any German patrols? At this hour of the night, soldiers would be the only ones out on the street. They usually came in pairs, patrolling along between the tall, narrow buildings, looking as if they owned the world. Good, he thought, no one in sight. Peter looked again in the direction of the big old church of St. Mary, and past that, Helsingør Harbor. He couldn't see it in the dark, and there were no lights on down in the street. Would Henrik be awake? As his eyes got used to the dim August moonlight, he tried to remember whose turn it was to start the message. He pulled out his silver-colored metal flashlight from underneath his bed, waiting by the window, and shivered in his pajamas. A minute went by, and then two, and then a faint yellow light blinked twice through a corridor of buildings. Peter scanned the street once more, making double sure no soldiers were passing below. All clear below. After 2 months of practice, it had become a lot easier to pick out the little patterns of light from a flashlight 3 blocks away. One short blink, 2 long, a long and a short. Each set of blinks, long or short, stood for a letter of Morse code, which Peter and his best friend Henrik Melchior had memorized over the summer. Peter whispered out the letters as they blinked. Hey, are you there? One more check down on the street before he blinked back a reply. The strolling soldiers never seemed to look up much, but if they did, it would not be a nice surprise to have them see a blinking light in his window. After sundown, everyone was supposed to keep their windows completely dark. Peter pointed his flashlight back in the direction of the first blinking light and worked the swift back and forth, back and forth. Of course I'm here. Dumb question, he thought. Have I ever been late for a signal? Not counting the time my alarm didn't go off, or the time I couldn't get the flashlight to work. He continued blinking the light. So, are you ready for the practice race tomorrow? Peter almost missed several of the letters, but he got the message through. I'm ready, Henrik flashed back. So is my bird. Too bad about yours. Peter grinned in the dark. Typical Henrik. He was always Mr. Competition, wanting to go head to head. So, okay, we'll see whose homing pigeon wins the race tomorrow. My bird is just as fast, and he knows it. We will see tomorrow morning, and may the best word win. But then he didn't finish the last letter. There was a noise out in the hallway, as if someone had gotten up. Peter snapped the flashlight off in a mid-blink, yanked down the heavy canvas shade, rolled back into bed, pulled the covers over his head, and pretended to be asleep. He heard his door squeak open, and there was no sound except his father's breathing. Peter held his breath. Then the door closed again, and the shuffling went back down the hall toward his parents' room. That was too close, thought Peter. He would have to explain to Henrik in the morning. Peter's dad did a lot of midnight checking around the house lately, especially since the war had started. He would check the windows to make sure the shades were pulled all the way down. Then he would peek outside, and Peter's mom would ask if anyone was out there, and they would worry about everything all over again. Worry, worry. Peter thought everyone in the little country of Denmark was worrying these days. His parents worried about how much food they could get, and they worried about the German soldiers all over the city. They even worried about Peter's friend Henrik, whose family was Jewish. Peter overheard them talking about it once, and at first it didn't make any sense to them. No one in Denmark had ever seemed to care who was Jewish and who was not, and who was Lutheran. But from what Peter's father said, the Germans thought a different way about the Jews, as if the Jews were to blame for every problem in the whole world or something. The Germans didn't want anyone to know how they captured the Jews in other parts of Europe, said Mr. Anderson. Whole families and everything, and how they took them to prison camps and even killed them. Peter was way too afraid to talk about anything like that with Henrik. He did understand what he could see, though. German soldiers in the streets, German boats in the harbor, sometimes German planes in the sky. They had just raced into the country about 3 years ago when Peter and his twin sister Elise were 8, with tanks and planes and ships, and they had completely taken over. They didn't ask or anything. Denmark was a little country, and the Danes didn't have much to fight back with. They'll leave again after they get what they want, Mr. Anderson said one night at dinner, right after the invasion. He did say that once, and Peter remembered it. But when he and Elise asked him more questions, their father wouldn't talk about it anymore. We're just trying to keep things as normal as we can for you two, he said, closing the book on the subject. The way he looked at them, serious and sad, told Peter not to ask anything else. But now that Peter and Elise had just turned 11, the Germans were still around, and Peter wondered how much longer it would go on, the war. They must not have gotten what they wanted yet. He lay awake, trying to fall asleep, trying to remember anything else his father had said. After a while, though, he gave up. Pigeon races were more fun to think about than wars. May the best bird win, Henrik. Before long, he heard his dad snoring again. That is the end of chapter 1. Let's see if there are any pictures in this book. Other than the map, there are none. So I'll show you the map one more time. And next time we will read chapter 2, which is Numbers 1, 2, and 3. That sounds interesting. This is Grandma Carla, and I love you.